G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. As a general rule, wheels often turn full circle, but sometimes it takes just a little bit of specialist knowledge to see the mechanism in action. So, Wharton's garage, remembered. To begin, the land at 65 East Avenue Glen Innes was first taken up or bought from the Crown on July 19, 1858, when a blacksmith shop was erected thereon. Between 1858 and 1910, the land changed hands 12 times before James Draffin, aka Jack Draffin, bought the premises from John Sully. I don't have a picture of the place back when John Sully owned it, but I do know that he manufactured ploughs and he actually designed and constructed a steam engine with the assistance of this 1898 vintage complete examination questions and answers for marine and stationary engineers by Swingle. When Jack Draffin bought the business from John Sully, this textbook was part of the professional library of the premises. In 1912, when this photograph was taken, Jack Draffin, it's the tall fella in the centre of the photograph, the one with a hat, employed my grandfather, Stanley Clough Wharton, second from the left, wearing an apron and a hat. My grandfather was employed as wheelwright, foreman and coach builder's woodman, meaning that he was responsible for all the woodwork done on all the carriages made there. Here we see a picture of him in 1917 being watched by my father as he works on easing the spokes into a wooden wagon wheel hub. Also appearing here in the 1912 photograph, third from the right, is Hugh Draffin, Jack Draffin's son. Hugh was the senior blacksmith, but he joined the Australian Imperial Forces, went away to the First World War and was killed in combat late in 1918. And that ended Jack's dreams of having Draffin and Son coach builders. So, early in 1919, Jack Draffin closed up shop on a Friday afternoon. On the following Monday, Stanley Clough Wharton reopened in a much smaller way, repairing coaches and carriages. 2 years after this photograph was taken, and 1 year before this school photo was taken. That's my old man in the centre of the frame with the big ears. My father didn't actually start to work for his father full-time in the business until 1923. And the way he told the story, he worked barefoot in the cinders around the blacksmith's forge for a week, and he bought his first pair of boots with his first week's wages. As the newspaper says, in 1923 his son Eric joined the business and assisted with the general coach work and blacksmithing, although as the motor vehicle was gradually replacing the horse-drawn vehicles, he became involved in motor car repairs. By 1926 the shop became known as Wharton's Garage, and mechanical work and body repairs were carried out. So this is the 1926 stationery. Dad's story was that he pulled a Model A Ford to pieces 3 times, put it back together 3 times, and because it kept running, they hung up a sign, all automotive repairs. The stationery claims it, every variety of repair to every make of car and truck. They had an agency for Federal trucks and Clyde batteries. At another time, they had an agency for English electric Whippet cars. In the years before the 1929 stock market crash, business was booming. This is a photograph taken in 1928. Over on the left, we see Stanley Clough Wharton, my grandfather. In the centre there, we see George Stark, my father's cousin from Emmaville. Here with the hat on, you see my father. We've got an ad for Delco Remy on the side of the building. We've got Wharton's painted on the roof. We've got an NRMA agency. They're selling Union brand benzene for cash only. The sign on the roof says Wharton's Motor Springs, pointing out that my grandfather still had the blacksmith forge working and he was adapting it to the motor trade. At about this stage, Stanley Clough Wharton had the first oxyacetylene cutting and welding gear between Tamworth and Brisbane. And when he wasn't hiding under his hat and covered in grease, the old man scrubbed up pretty well. He was even known to smile. In 1936, my grandfather made my father a full partner in the business. This photograph was taken 1 year later in 1937, and it shows a few changes. They've got rid of the fuel pump, they've got rid of the NRMA agency. With my father behind the camera, we have Col McLaughlin, Stan Wharton, George Stark, Jack Davies, and Alf Hogben. That was working left to right. During the war years, very few replacement parts were obtainable and motor vehicles were in poor condition. Consequently, Eric Wharton saw the necessity for engine reconditioning work, and he progressively installed specialised precision machinery for this type of work. In the same way that John Sully taught himself to make steam engines by reading the textbook, my father taught himself to be a motor mechanic by reading the textbook. 1927 vintage, which he collected 2 years later. 1929, he got his NRMA motor mechanics certificate. Here's the old man at the end of the Second World War, with George Stark on the right side of the photograph, Dad's left side. George is standing in front of the 12-foot bed lathe. All the heavy equipment was run by belts and pulleys and overhead shafts, all powered by a single 415 volt alternating current motor. Here's a 1946 vintage photograph of the Precision Workshop. Just as in 1928, Stan Wharton had the first oxyacetylene gear between Brisbane and Tamworth. Come 1948, my father Eric Wharton had the first crankshaft grinder between Newcastle and Brisbane. When I was a kid, he used to get up and meet the 5 o'clock mail train, which had come overnight from Sydney, and he'd pick up a crankshaft that somebody had put on the train at sundown the previous day in Tamworth. He'd grind it before breakfast, put it back on the railway station at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it would be back in Tamworth by midday. Overnight service. Glen Innes grinding Tamworth's crankshafts. That doesn't happen anymore. In 1949, my father bought his father's share of the plant and machinery, which is why I'm in a position to display some wheel writing equipment. For example, if you recall the 1917 photograph of a 60-degree angle chisel and a wooden mallet to ease the wooden spokes in the wooden wheel hub of the wagon wheel, you might as well say that all is not lost. Not yet. So, nearly 30 years after this picture was taken, my father printed his own stationery, and in 1956 he purchased his father's share of the land and the buildings, and he became sole proprietor. And around about that time, Dad got rid of all the employees, some by not replacing them, and for the others, my father made arrangements for them to be taken on, employed by the new mechanic that he was entering a partnership with, or a business deal, so that my father was going to concentrate on precision engineering and somebody else was going to be the mechanic, and they were going to share the workshop. This got George Stark's nose significantly out of joint because he was Dad's cousin. He'd been working in the business for years, and although he didn't have any qualifications as a mechanic, he sort of expected to be allowed to take over the mechanical repairs side of the business. So pretty much for the rest of their lives, my father and George Stark didn't talk to one another. They'd sort of nod politely and shake hands at funerals, and that would be it. The last time my father had a business partner was in February till October 1958 fellow's name was Willi Struve. He was a German army mechanic brought to Australia, sponsored by Stan Almandy. And Willi Struve not only worked for Stan Almandy, he rented his house. So when Stan Almandy died, it meant Willi Struve was out of a job, he was out of a house. He went to my father and he was looking for a job as a mechanic, and my old man did not want to employ a mechanic, but he wouldn't mind having a mechanic on the other side of the workshop. So he said, look, I'll put £1,000 in the bank, Willi, and you can draw on it for your expenses and I'll draw on it for my business expenses. And we both put our takings into the bank account, and at the end of each week, we'll halve whatever's left over the £1,000, just a 50-50 split. So it was an instant partnership. Very nice, very sweet deal for Willi. And Willi needed somewhere to live, so my father guaranteed the house loan for him in 1958. And at the end of 6 months, Willi decided they needed to have 2 sets of books because he thought they were paying too much tax, and my father was too honest for that game. So they parted company at a very inconvenient time because Dad's first wife died the same week the partnership fell over. And Willi didn't know what the word guarantor meant, so he just kept on paying the house loan. So that was pretty handy. As it turned out, Willi may have had something of a point regarding the income tax, because the following year, or maybe it was the year after, it was the year before I was born. I was born in 61, the partnership was 58. So either 59 or 60, my father, working on his own in Wharton's garage as an engine reconditioner, made enough income that he had to pay 12 pensions in income tax. And he was spending a huge amount of time at the workshop, as I said, starting work at 5 in the morning. And when I was a baby, he wouldn't knock off till 10 o'clock at night, and I wouldn't go to sleep until he'd given me the 10 o'clock feed. So in the early 1960s, maybe 64 or 65, he bought the Furukabad school bus run, because that meant he couldn't actually get to the workshop till 9:30 or so. And then he had to leave the workshop at slightly before 3 o'clock. And he slowly eased his way out of the business by not being there. And in 1973, the year I went away to boarding school at 11, Dad sold Wharton's garage to Ian Halliday. There we see a picture of Ian Halliday, who took a successful engine reconditioning business and he added a brake reconditioning business, and then he got a Repco parts agency, and then when he'd had the place for 4 years, he opened a Toyota agency and had 6 people working for him, with a grand gala opening at the end of 1977, which was coincidentally about the same time a bloke came up the driveway looking for somebody to supply and fit a set of spotted gum sulky shafts to his racing Spider, which is a particularly lightweight, pleasant style of a trotting sulky. And okay, in the rafters of the shed behind Wharton's garage were 6 pairs of the last bundle of 12 pairs of spotted gum pre-sawn sulky shafts, which my grandfather bought from Sydney in 1936. So over the Christmas holidays, I got to use this stuff and help the old man fit a set of sulky shafts. The other 5 pairs were on-sold, and then as word got around, bloke came up with 2 wooden wheels which required steel tyres to be fitted to them. So the old man went down to the back of Wharton's garage and dug down 6 inches through the accumulated detritus and topsoil to find the tyring plate. And then he split a load of wood, just as he used to do when he was 16 or 17 years old, built a fire around the steel tyre, heated it up to red hot, whereupon it expanded. Then they lifted up the red hot tyre and dropped it over the wooden wheel and quenched it with the water, thus shrinking the wheel, or shrinking the tyre onto the wheel. The steel tyre on the wooden wheel was for an obsolete form of wheat harvester or header or something that was being restored. And having done one for practice quietly in the back of Wharton's garage, the second tyre was put on the second wheel at the Land of the Beardies History House as a public demonstration, and once again I was there to help as a kid. That's when I learned to use a circular ruler and how to measure the inside circumference of the tyre and make sure it was 6 inches smaller than the outside circumference of the wheel, so the thermal shrinkage of the red hot tyre would hold the wheel together. Full circle. Ciao.